Hello, it's Scott Manley here. A couple of days ago, on Thanksgiving, we saw the latest launch of Soyuz to the International Space Station. This was Soyuz MS-28, and in addition to a pair of cosmonauts, it was also carrying NASA astronaut Christopher Williams. And this was okay, a successful launch, got to the space station and docked, but soon after the launch, Russian rocket watchers realized that something was seriously wrong with the pad. Drone footage as they flew around showed a whole lot of wreckage in the flame pit next to the launch pad. Now, this is a distinctive part of how Russia and Soviet Union built their launch pads for the Soyuz and various other rockets. They would build this very, very large, deep pit, excavate it out of the ground, and then the rocket would be suspended over this. In fact, the pit was considered, well, with Yuri Gagarin in Vostok, because the abort system, the escape system, was an ejection seat, they actually had to string a giant steel net over this pit so that if he did eject, he wouldn't end up landing inside the pit with potentially burning propellant in it. But the Russian space, watchers, the fans, very quickly recognized that the hardware which had landed in the pit was what was called the service cabin. This is part of the launch pad, which allows the crew members to get underneath the rocket because they need to get under there to connect umbilicals to access the engines and of course to put the giant 8-foot long matchsticks up inside the rocket nozzles. And you may think I'm joking, but no, the Soyuz is still lit. The engines are still lit using pyrotechnic devices attached on the end of, I believe, spruce wooden frames. Soyuz is a rocket with a lot of history behind it, and this pad in particular goes back to the early 1960s. So this is at Baikonur. Now, Baikonur was, of course, where the original R-7 launches occurred, and it was also where they launched Sputnik, they launched Vostok, Yuri Gagarin, but this isn't the pad that was used for that. The original pad that was used for these early launches is now called Gagarin Start, and it's being converted into a museum. It was left out of various upgrades, and so this second pad that was dated from the early 1960s, this is the one that's there. Now, the problem is that with this service cabin underneath the pad unavailable, they are going to be unable to launch rockets to the International Space Station from this site, and this is the only site in the world which is equipped to launch the Progress and the Soyuz. So there are 4 different Soyuz launch sites around the world, and this one is the oldest. It's called Baikonur, but actually when it was set up, it was located near to a place called Tirtam, and they chose the Baikonur name to confuse potential spies who might, look elsewhere for it. Ultimately, they then changed the name of Tirtam to Baikonur, and, that's what we've got. Now, this is located in Kazakhstan, which was part of the Soviet Union at the time, but since the breakup of the Soviet Union, it is a separate nation. And Russia pays, $100 million or something per year to lease this area so they can use it. Kazakhstan actually has a lot of advantages because it's a big flat area. The steppes are they're a great place to land the capsules because it's a big flat open area. And that's sort of why this would sort of make sense for them. Now, when the R-7 missile finally got to the point that it was operational, they needed to actually set it up so it could actually launch these warheads at the US. And for that, they set up a missile base, and they set it up close to the Arctic Circle because the shortest distance between Russia and the USA is over the poles. So that was Plesetsk. That was set up in 1960, and it hosted the first Soviet ICBMs, which were the R-7 missiles. They only ever hosted a handful of these at the time because they were terribly ineffective weapons. But eventually, by the late 1960s, they weren't really needed as a missile base, and they began using it to launch payloads into orbit. In particular, since it was capable of using the R-7 rockets, it was used to launch the Zenit spy satellites, which are related to the Yuri Gagarin Vostok capsule in that they have this spherical re-entry capsule, and instead of having a cosmonaut in there, you would have a big camera that would point down at the ground. This continued right up into the mid-1980s. Plesetsk is about 800 kilometers north of Moscow, so it's much closer to the center of Russia, and it is actually on Russian territory. The problem is, it is so far north that it could never actually launch to the International Space Station. So the third location was set up in 2009, and that was in South America, in Kourou. Arianespace needed a medium-sized launcher. They had Vega for small payloads, they had Ariane 5 for the big payloads. Soyuz was sort of in the middle, so they basically would buy that from Russia and launch it from South America, and that meant they had to set up a pad in there, and it's a fully capable Soyuz pad. Finally, Vostochny was set up much more recently, and originally it wasn't going to hold Soyuz or host Soyuz, but I guess at some point it was decided that that capability was needed because the other alternate rockets were not going to be able to fly from this. Now Vostochny is out in the far east of Russia. It's about 800 kilometers from the ocean, and it is at a latitude of 51.88 degrees north, whereas the International Space Station is 51.6. So it's very close to be able to get to the space station, but not quite. But other than that, it is able to handle a lot of the things that would previously fly from Baikonur. For example, they flew a lot of the OneWeb payloads out of Vostochny until, of course, the Ukraine war meant that OneWeb wasn't flying out of there anymore. So now, all these pads, they all have to handle the Soyuz rocket, and I want to talk about the launch structure. So first of all, as I've said, the Soviet rockets, they have this ginormous flame pit, right? They had to excavate this. It takes months, years or whatever to dig out all this stuff. That's where the flames go. The launch pad itself is like a big concrete structure which is, very high above this pad, and then there's a flame diverter underneath it. And because of this, it means that the Soyuz launch pad doesn't have like a water suppression system like the US pads would have. It's entirely blowing gas out into the air. So anyway, yeah, this big concrete pad extends out over it, and there's a hole in the center which the rocket is extended down into. So it rolls in there with a train, and then it is upended into the vertical position, and the rear end of the rocket extends down into this hole underneath the pad. Now, it's held in place here by 4 different support arms. So there's arms that extend out inside this hole, and they latch from underneath, supporting the load. And then there's 4 arms on top that sort of fold in against the side, and they will stop the rocket from folding around. And all these things are designed so that as the weight is removed from these, they will fold back. And the way these fold back is likened to a flower opening up, and so it's colloquially known as the tulip system. There's 2 other umbilical arms that are underneath the pad as well that are connected, and those will connect like the umbilicals to the rear of the rocket because, of course, they need all that. And then on the side, there will also be a large umbilical arm which connects umbilicals to the various upper stages going up the rocket. Now, this whole structure here is on a turntable because on the early Soyuz rockets, it actually didn't have the ability to roll after takeoff to fly to the correct launch azimuth. It could only pitch down and maintain its heading. So to go for a target orbit, they would actually rotate the entire launch pad to point in the correct direction. Now, I believe that capability now exists in the V2 rockets, but the pads still have this capability built in. Now, to actually access the rocket when it is sitting on the pad, the old systems, they would have these 2 sets of platforms that would fold up. So there's these 2 very large arms, and you'll see crew members climbing up inside this so they can get to every step of the rocket. This is how the crew get into the Soyuz. And then once everybody's secured, once everybody has cleared that, these 2 arms can fold all the way down and out of the way. So those are available at Plesetsk and at Baikonur. And you'll see that during the launch, that these are folded down. But for Kourou and Vostochny, well, now we'd reached the 21st century, and it's decided that the crew members or the technicians working on the ground didn't have to brave the cold or the heat. So we have this big air-conditioned building. So that after the rocket is placed onto the supports, this large building can roll over. It's like a 1,600-ton tower that moves along 140 meters of rail towards this thing. It takes like an hour or so to do this, but once it encloses around it, they can turn on the air conditioning, and the crew members can access all the same hardware and everything to it. Now, this doesn't really support things like the Soyuz particularly well, because the Soyuz spacecraft, because it would take a long time to go in and out, whereas the arms that fold up and down move relatively quickly. So This pad underneath it, the next part that we're talking about is this service cabin. And this rolls out underneath the rocket after the rocket is placed vertically on the pad. And once it rolls out on a pair of rails and it locks into place, and then they can raise up the railings, and technicians on the ground can get underneath the rear of the rocket and start plugging it in and setting up their giant matchsticks and everything like that. Now, once the rocket is getting ready to launch, that whole structure then slides back into a niche on the wall, and there's a big heat shield attached to it which is supposed to shield this from the rocket exhaust, because you don't want to obviously have that damaged during the launch. Now, by the looks of things, there's supposed to be like a locking pin added in place, and that may not have been added in this case. So why would this then roll out of there during the launch? And it's pretty obvious if you know basic physics. As the rocket starts firing its engines into that flame pit, the very rapidly moving gas creates a Venturi effect, right? It starts to suck in air from elsewhere. It creates a low pressure zone. And that big flat heat shield that is supposed to protect that service cabin, that is just like a piston. It's going to be like a sail. It's going to get sucked out of there by that pressure. So as the rocket is firing its engines and beginning to lift off, if this thing isn't locked in place, you can imagine the whole thing starting to get sucked down the line and roll along. And I believe that's what has happened in this case. And so by the time it gets to the end, it's going fast enough that it's able to jump the very small ridge right at the end. And that would mean that one end would go over with the shield. It would then probably just be like a piece of toast with jam on it. It would make one complete flip, hit the shield into the flame pit, and then end up upside down in that structure. And that's what we see from the various images. Okay, so without the service cabin, Russia basically has no way of launching the Progress or the Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station. This is the only pad that does that. And that means that, well, in 6 months' time, that's typically when they would be launching another Soyuz unless there was a problem. Well, right now they're not going to be able to do that. But a more pressing engagement would be the Progress, which was supposed to launch later in December. That's not going to be able to go up unless they come up with a way to get service members and crew underneath the rocket to be able to connect the umbilicals and everything. Now, other launch sites, could they handle this? Well, Plesetsk, well, that's too far north. It cannot get to the International Space Station orbit. So that's not possible, even if the pad was equipped for the Progress of the Soyuz, which it isn't. Kourou, yeah, that could actually reach the International Space Station, but it's not equipped for the Soyuz spacecraft or the Progress. And I believe the pad is now given over to another company which is in the process of setting up their own hardware on it. Finally, Vostochny in the east. That is close to the orbit of the International Space Station. It's only about 30 kilometers north, which isn't a big deal, but it is a big deal given the limited guidance capabilities of the Soyuz rocket. Like, ULA has their Atlas. It is able to correct like a 30-kilometer cross-range difference, but I don't believe the Soyuz is able to do that. But even if it was, you could certainly, well, the launch site isn't equipped again for the Progress on the Soyuz, so they'd have to get all the integration, servicing hardware like special air conditioning and whatnot. Vostochny could actually be used for a Progress launch if all these things were solved, and they could get the cross-range things solved as well. But it could not be used to launch a crewed Soyuz, because Vostochny is about 800 kilometers from the coast, and if there was an abort during any time along there, all the terrain along the length of it is like forested, it's mountains, it's not somewhere you want a crew capsule to be falling down, like the Kazakh steppes, right? Kazakh steppes are nice big flat plains. It's very easy to find a spacecraft that is parachuted down in that region. It's not so good to do that from the east of the US, east of Russia. Now, once they're beyond that, it's the ocean. The ocean is not really well set up for Soyuz recovery either. It is something they train for, but really the Soyuz does not like to splash down. And the one time it did accidentally splash down in a lake, almost everyone on board died. It was like, it was really dramatic problem. But fortunately, everyone survived. So At this point, Russia has to try and fix this if they want to continue with the International Space Station. They could try and fix this pad. It could take months, it could take longer. The hardware itself, well, they had to build one for Vostochny, so they still know how to build these things. I understand there'll probably be some slight changes to the integration, but it shouldn't be that ridiculously difficult. On the other hand, Russia may not want to spend a lot of money building out a pad in Kazakhstan, a place that it's kind of actually trying to get out of. It's trying to launch fewer rockets from there. But, Vostochny just isn't suitable for it, so they're kind of stuck with it for now. They could move Progress over there, but it could be that they stop launching Progress from Baikonur if they decide to actually bite the bullet and go out there. They would like to be able to launch to their own future space station from Vostochny. I actually just saw a paper that was published where they were analysing various recovery zones and abort scenarios. And they point out that a sun-synchronous orbit or space station for Russia would make more sense because they could launch from Vostochny and have many more places to safely recover their spacecraft. Some people are saying that this could be the end of Baikonur as a Russian launch site. And, well, I think that's overly dramatic. I think they have to keep this going for the next few years at least. But it could definitely be the beginning of the end. We'll see what happens in the next few weeks or months. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.